prayer is the answer? Anybody believe prayer is the answer? Prayer is the answer. Every day, if you turn on the news, it almost appears that there's nothing good going on in our world. Every day you turn on the news, some tragedy has taken place. It almost appears that the media only focuses on that which is negative and not positive. Prayer is the answer. In 2012, February 26, 2012, Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old African-American male, was shot and killed while walking home. He was unarmed. He was shot and killed by George Zimmerman, who later was acquitted. Michael Brown, an 18-year-old African-American male, was 18, who also was shot and killed while walking home after an alleged robbery. He too was unarmed. Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old teen, was shot and killed at a neighborhood playground while holding a tar pellet gun. Officers arrived on the scene, and within 3 seconds after arriving, Tamir Rice had been killed. In the video, you can hear the officer saying that we have a black male about 20 years of age holding a semi-automatic weapon. They stated that when they rolled up, they asked him to put the weapon down, and that he reached into his front to pull the weapon, and that they were trying to block the entryway to the community center so that he wouldn't go in and hurt anyone. Yet video shows 3 seconds after they arrived, 12-year-old Tamir Rice was killed. Charleston, South Carolina, June 17. 9 people were killed at a prayer meeting. Every day we turn on the television, it almost appears that nothing good is going on in our community. It almost makes you want to ask the question, why am I praying? It almost appears that in light of everything that's taking place, God is not hearing our prayers. It would almost appear. Just a couple of weeks ago, June 26th, the Supreme Court ruled that they had found within the Constitution. Got me kind of confused right there because I've kind of read it, and what they say I've never seen before. They say that they have found within the Constitution the right for same-sex marriage. my Bible tells me that in the last days, that as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the second coming of the Lord. It almost makes you not want to pray. Every time we bow down on our knees, we are praying, and we are asking God to lead us and to guide us. And it almost appears that God is not hearing our prayers. In light of all of these profound current events, it's no wonder Jesus tells us that men should always pray and faint not. He says that men should always pray and faint not. Now, I don't mean to sound discouraging this morning. I don't mean to try to bring you down, but if the truth be told, and I guess I have to be honest, that for us as Christians, our world is not going to get any better, only worse. It's only going to get better when Jesus returns. It's no wonder that Jesus tells us that men should always pray and not faint. Men should always pray and not faint. This parable here in Luke chapter 18 is sometimes called the parable of the unjust judge, and sometimes the parable of the persistent widow. However, if we look very closely at the text, we will find that it is the widow and not the judge who has the starring role. Although the judge does make a profound statement that caught Jesus' attention, and he directed his disciples, and not only his disciples, but he directs us as well to pay attention to what the unjust judge says. Here in verse 4, it says that, and he would not for a while, but afterward he said within himself, though I fear not God, nor regard man. Verse 5, he says, yet because this widow troubles me, I will avenge her, lest through her continual coming she wearies me. And he would not for a while, because he feared not God. Do you know that there are individuals in our society who have no respect for God's authority and who he is, and they have no concern, or they are not concerned with the well-being of mankind? This is the kind of person that we're dealing with in this text, with this unjust judge. How do you think the Martin family felt when their young son was killed, and they went to the Justice Department, and they went to the police department in Florida, and they told them that there was nothing they could do about their young son being killed, because all George Zimmerman was doing was defending himself. He was defending himself against a young boy who had been visiting with his father, and he was on his way home, and he was wearing a hoodie on his head. And because this person who killed Trayvon Martin wanted to be a police officer, he was only a security captain. He himself decided that Trayvon Martin had no value only because of the color of his skin. How do you think Michael Brown's family felt when they got the news that their son had been killed? How do you think Tamir Rice's family felt when they got the news that their son had been killed? All of these families were crying out to the Justice Department. All of these families were crying out to the leaders in the community. And yet, like the unjust judge, they were saying to that judge, avenge us of our adversary. And it said that they would not avenge them for a while. You see, this widow understood that she had nowhere else to go. She had wealth and she had money and she had inheritance stored up, but because she was a widow, this unjust judge, the reason why he didn't answer her prayer immediately is because she was a female. And in some cultures, in the Jewish culture and in our culture today, it is a known fact that women have no value at all. The only value that women have in some of these cultures is the value of bearing children. That's the only value that they have. And because of the culture that they were in, and this unjust judge, he knew that she was just a widow, and he knew that because of who she was, he didn't have to answer her at all. Number two, he didn't answer her because he was very uncaring, and he was very self-centered. He held all the cards. He had all the power. After all, he's a judge. He's sitting on the bench. I can do what I want to do. I can answer you if I want to answer you, and I can not answer you if I don't want to answer you. But the Bible says that he would not answer her for a while. And then the unjust judge says this. He says, "Yet, because of her continual coming, I will avenge her, lest she worry me." See, one thing we can learn about this widow is that this widow, she didn't have anybody else to turn to, and she went to the only person that she knew that could give her what she asked for. See, sometimes we fail to realize that God is the only person that we can turn to in times of hardship. God is the only one that can avenge us of our adversaries. God is the only one that can do for us what we need to do. But yet sometimes we find ourselves going to everybody else except God. We go to our mothers, and we go to our fathers, and we go to our sisters and our brothers, and we go to our bosses on our jobs, and we go to these people, and we go to that people, and yet we still find ourselves totally discouraged after receiving the advice that they give us. But this widow, she understood that God was the only person that could give her what she stood in need of. This judge had no respect for God. Yet, if this unjust judge, hard-hearted judge would give in to the pressure of persistence, how much more do you think that God would not answer your prayers when you come to him? Sometimes hardships get so difficult on us, and sometimes our trials and our tribulations are so hard on us, we sometimes believe that God is not hearing and not answering our prayers. I remember when I first learned how to pray, I would be down on my knees, and I would be answering prayers, and I was asking God to do this and asking God to do that, and I was just coming into the church, and I was taught that God heard prayers and God answered prayers and this and that, and every time I would pray, I would get up and I would go throughout my life, and it almost seemed like God was not hearing my prayers. And I told myself, well, it's not going to do me any good to pray. He ain't listening. Why am I praying to somebody, like someone said this morning, why am I praying to somebody that I can't see and I can't feel? He ain't listening. And then all of a sudden, this little thought came to my mind, and this little voice came to mind and said to me, well, if you stop depending on me to answer prayers in the way you want me to answer them, maybe you can see that I'm answering your prayers. You see, one of the reasons why we feel like God is not answering our prayers is because we try to get God to answer prayers in the way we want him to answer prayers. We tell God, well, Lord, you know, I want this and I want that, and well, I need you for you to do it this way. The only time that God answered my prayer the way that I wanted him to answer my prayer is when I met my wife. I specifically prayed for a certain type of woman. I told God, I said, Lord, you know, I'm tired of ripping and running these streets, and I can probably, you know, I can probably catch me one or two, but I'm tired of doing that. I say I'm giving up. If you want me to get married and you want me to have a wife, you're gonna have to send her to me. And I was sitting over there, about the 4th or 5th row down, one Sabbath morning, and I felt a tap on my shoulder. And it was my wife. She wasn't my wife at the time, but she tapped me on my shoulder, and she said to me, she said, if you ever need a friend to talk to, here is my number. So I had to kind of play it kind of cool, because I didn't want her to know I was excited. So I waited for about 3 days, and then I called her. I felt like that if I waited a week, I might miss out. But it was the only time. It was the only time that God answered my prayers in the way that I wanted him to answer my prayer. See, sometimes we can't depend on God to answer in the way that we want him to answer, because what we want is not what God wants for us, and God knows what's best for us. Stop by to tell you this morning that prayer is the answer. Number 2 is because in the church, we don't believe that God answers prayers, because sometimes in the church we're taught that if we continue to go to God over and over again with the same request, we're not exercising any faith. But this text tells us something totally different. It says, because the widow kept coming, and she 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 kept coming. And the unjust judge said, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. I better hurry up and answer this. I better go ahead and do what this woman wants, because she's going to wear me out. And God is saying to us, that prayer is not about the long-windedness that you have. It's not about being long-winded. It's about coming to me every day with the same request over and over again, showing me that you trust me to know that I'm going to answer your prayers. But you have to understand, I'm only going to answer in the way that I want to answer, not in the way that you want me to answer. Because my ways are not your ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts, says God. And so when God answers our prayers, we will know that God answered our prayers. Now there's something else here also, because it said that for a while the widow, the judge wouldn't answer the widow's prayers. She kept coming, and she kept coming, and she kept coming, and the judge just wouldn't answer her prayers. And sometimes when we continue to go to God and it appears that God is not hearing, and we're going through our trials and our tribulations and our struggles and our hardships we go through, and we continue to pray, and we continue to pray, and we continue to pray, and it almost appears that God is not answering our prayers. But what we have to realize is that God bears long and suffers long with us. It says God is patiently waiting. Perhaps the reason why God hasn't answered one of your prayers right now is because you're not ready to receive what it is he wants to give you. Maybe there's something within your character that God needs to work out before you can receive what it is he needs to give you. Let's see. Sometimes things if I ask God for something and he does it for me and he cannot, let me put it this way. Sometimes God doing things for us is not good for us immediately. Because if he does it for us immediately, it will be more detrimental. So to save us and to protect us, God has to make us wait a little while before he gives us what it is we're asking for. For some people, it has to be instantaneous, because to make them wait will be detrimental to them. So just because God is making you wait does not mean that God is not hearing your prayers. It just means that God is working it out for you the way he wants it to be, so that when you step into what it is he wants you to have, you will be ready to receive it. My wife talked about it this morning. She talked about she's on this job and she is trying to get out, and she's praying and she's praying and she's praying and she comes home sometimes and I ask her how her day has been, and she goes into this field about being down on that job and there's nothing I can say to her, to convince her that God is listening, because she needs to know that God is listening for herself. She needs to know that where she is because God has her there for a specific reason. And when God is ready to open that door for her to move someplace else, she's ready to receive what God has for her. Lesson number 1. To persist in prayer and not give up does not mean long, drawn-out prayers. Consistent prayer means keeping our petitions before God daily, believing that he will answer. Keeping our petitions before God daily. It doesn't mean that I have to spend 15 minutes on my knees asking God for something, which means it just simply means that the thing that I'm going through, if I'm asking God to deliver me from something, I need to keep that before God's throne. Because if I kneel down on my knees right here today, and I never go back and ask God for the same thing again, I'm telling God that I don't believe that he can answer my prayers. But here in this text, God says, continue to come to me in prayer on a daily basis. Forget about what the world says. Forget about what the people in the church say. I'm telling you that it's okay for you to come to me over and over and over and over and over again. If God didn't believe that, why would it be in the text? It's in the book. Keeping your petitions before God on a daily basis. Lesson 2. When we live by faith, we should never grow weary in prayer. Sometimes God delays his answer to our prayers, but his delays have good reasons for known only to him. God is the only one that knows what he's doing. You ever notice how sometimes we think we know more than God? Y'all might not be like that, but sometimes I find myself thinking I know more than God. I remember I was coming. I was on my way home from work one evening, and I was working in Carrollton, and I don't know if anyone knows about that area. I was working in Carrollton, and so coming off of my job on Crosby Road, I would get on 35, and when I get to a certain point, 35 goes this way, and Loop 12 goes this way. And normally I like to go 35. It seems like it's a more direct route for me. It seems like it's a lot smoother drive. But this time I came out and something kept pulling me toward Loop 12. I said, nah, I'm going to go 35. And the closer I got, something kept pulling me toward Loop 12. I said, nah, I'm going to go 35. And the closer I got, the stronger it got. Go Loop 12, go Loop 12. I said, nah, I'm going to go 35. And I went 35. And it took me over 3 hours to get home when it normally would have taken me a 30-minute drive. Only because I thought I knew more than God. I thought I didn't allow God to change my plans for me that morning. Lesson number 3. If godless people who mistreat us unjustly respond to our constant pressure and give us what we desire, our God, who is a great and loving God, will also hear our cries for help and respond to our requests. All God is asking is that we continually come to him in prayer. Constant prayer, constant prayer, constant prayer, constant prayer, constant prayer, constant prayer. You don't always have to get down on your knees when you pray. When you're out there on that freeway and you see this big truck coming at you, you don't have time to get down on your knees in your car and say, Lord, you're looking up and you say, Lord, help me, save me. That's a prayer. We see all the things that's going on around us. We should always pray. And if you think that the Supreme Court decision is the only thing that we have to worry about, my Bible tells me that there's going to be a time when the legislature is going to say, and it's coming very soon, they're going to say, no more worship on Sabbath. The Sunday Blue law is on the way. It's no reason, it's no wonder that Jesus tells us that men ought always pray and not faint. Men ought always pray and not faint. I'm going to close with this. It's in James chapter 5. James chapter 5, verses 13 through 15. It says, is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Now, when I read that passage, I understood the first part of that. It says, any among you afflicted, let him pray. I understood that. But then it says to me, it says, if is any merry, let him sing psalms. And I'm asking myself the question, what does singing psalms have to do with praying? And I found out that just like you pray when you are afflicted, you should pray when you're happy. Singing psalms and hymns, and we did the congregational hymns this morning, and Cassandra sang this morning. That's a prayer coming from the heart through song. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. Then he says this, and the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. And the prayer of faith, the prayer of faith